And as senators do prepare to consider the president-elect's picks for his cabinet, they may be doing so without a well-established staple of the confirmation process, and that is an FBI background check. The Trump transition team has so far not signed the requisite agreements with the White House or the DOJ to allow the FBI to screen his personnel choices, both for the process of obtaining security clearances and meeting the Senate's usual standards for the nominations. I want to discuss a little bit more about this and what it could mean overall. So let's bring in Daniel Meyer, partner over at Tully Rinckey Law Firm, where he specializes in background checks, security clearances, and federal employment law. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Josh, glad to be with you again.
All right, so first off, I do want to talk about an FBI background check in general. Kind of going back to basics here, what does an FBI background check consist of, and how is it different than maybe a background check that I would get for work?
So the first thing to remember, this is the White House. So the standard of review is at the same level as, say, the Central Intelligence Agency or even the FBI itself. So within that context, there are questionnaires that are specific to the White House. The one question that really grabs everybody is, have you ever done anything that would be of embarrassment to the president? That doesn't show up on other government forms. Beyond that, they do the same review that's been done for many years now. And that review entails 13 guidelines, which were distilled from counterintelligence cases back in the 1980s. KGB handed us our anatomy in the 1980s. They thieved a lot of our stuff using our own employees. So all that experience was boiled down into a set of guidelines. The guidelines were then mapped to a document called the SF-86 or EQIP in the electronic form. And those guidelines are what the background investigator uses to go into various government databases and collect information, not make findings, just does a report, usually 40 to 50 pages long. And that report goes to the head of security of the agency granting access. The key to remember here is this is the Biden administration deciding whether President-elect Donald Trump gets access. Okay, so this is all a memorandum of agreement. All that stuff is just to give somebody who's outside the system permission to enter the system before he takes charge. As soon as he gets his warrant or does his oath of office on January 20th, Donald Trump owns this process and he can order it the way he wants to.
And that's what I was going to ask. Going a little bit deeper into that, can he bypass some of the requirements? Because I know he has a lot of concern about the FBI leadership, and that's kind of what has led to this decision or lack of decision at this point. So can he kind of bypass that requirement?
Well, not as president-elect, but as president, and it's not a bypass, as president, if he wants to obey the rule of law, he would just simply issue an executive order which would change the system. And he could even carve out a special process for his kitchen cabinet in the White House and adopt special rules for them if he wanted to do that. There are going to be unintended consequences from that process if he goes in that path, but it's certainly an option he has.
It sounds like, as I mentioned, that a lot of the issue lies in Trump's suspicions surrounding the current FBI leadership. But let's say Trump and his team do allow the FBI to run these checks. What happens if someone is flagged, and what kind of things could overall be flagged by that check?
Okay, so the report does not make recommendations. It's just a big collection of facts. It gives sourcing, so if it's released through a FOIA, it's frequently redacted. And it will cover the 13 guidelines. So there's allegiance to the United States. So if you've been engaged with enemies of the state, they might pick that up on a review of FISA warrants or other means of surveillance. That could end up in there. There's a financial provision. There's use of drugs, sexual conduct. By and large, most of the sexual conduct rules have gone by the wayside since the 1980s, but it still needs to be non-criminal. It still needs to be consensual. Even the fetish stuff has gone away. You'd be surprised at what federal employees can engage in and still be allowed to have access. So those are the types of things that will be on there. I've been surprised in the last 4 or 5 years the extent to which the FBI has invoked Guideline A, allegiance to the United States, against the people who were up on Capitol Hill on January 6th. That provision hadn't been used actively for many years. It's the one they stung Oppenheimer on, if anybody's seen the movie. But those are the types of things that are looked at.
If Trump does bypass the FBI background checks, could that in any way, just based on your expertise and opinion here, could that sway the Republican-led Senate in whether or not that they actually do go ahead with confirming some of his nominees?
Well, in the first analysis, I'm not convinced that would. The United States Senate is interested in the United States Senate, okay? They want to protect their privileges. They don't want Donald Trump's horse stabled in their chamber. That's basically what goes on there. But senators do have a big think perspective. And to the extent that a bypass would affect the flow of classified information in the executive branch and between the United States government and our allies, you may see senators stepping forward to caution the president, even with their votes, that this is not appropriate for the good conduct of the affairs of the United States.
All right, Daniel Meyer, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and help break down all the latest developments. Anything that you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
Well, this transitions are dangerous times. The 9/11 Commission pointed to the, poor transition between the Clinton team and the Bush team as a part of the reason why we got sucker punched on 9/11. So this happens. The Bay of Pigs was due to the CIA withholding information from President Kennedy. So we've got to sort this out so that President Trump gets the information President Trump needs to run the executive branch. And that should be the primary goal.
All right, Daniel, thank you again for being here. I'm sure we'll have you back very soon to discuss a lot more topics. Thank you again for being here.
Okay. Good morning, Josh.